Jack's out here with their post a reaction, post an opinion piece, post a take on the internet. Well, no one is allowed to post takes on the internet, not by the wrath of the other YouTubers. I didn't pre-watch this. I clicked on it. And if you click on it, YouTube shows you it as pre-watched. I'm sorry, chat, I promise you. I assume this is probably something related to the discourse about the Earth's Arctic nonsense we had on the Twitter. Kind of semi-related to the hard leg video we watched yesterday.
I want to talk about a Hexlex tweet. So a couple of days ago, YGOrganization changed hands. If you're unfamiliar with this website, they do a really good job of reporting on new cards released into the OCG, which gives us a several-month window to prepare
all of
for
that great Rushdown news.
Here. If you want to stay up to date on premieres, it's the best place to do so, and apparently someone else thought so because they purchased the site. They also redesigned how it looked. I've seen a lot of tweets talking about
redesign
how
looks good, by
frustrating
the way.
it is that it now looks like every other Web 2.0 website, but like, really?
I think it's better. The old one wasn't very good.
Layout. Anyway, YGOrganization recently started posting opinion articles. I'm not sure if this is going to be a one-time thing or the start of a new series of articles by the previous site owner, but regardless, we got one for the new ban list, and...
You know, people who post opinion pieces as articles is like... That feels like a very dated type of medium, doesn't it? But... Is this just going to be a review of that? Please, MBT, don't just review a ban list take, right? This is... If you really think about it, this is like someone on Reddit posting their opinion on the ban list and then making a video about that opinion. That's kind of what we're doing here. Please, MBT, don't be baited. Please, Joseph, no.
As Hexlex points out in this tweet, it's not very useful. This article is meant to be a bit of an explainer for the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Limited list that goes into effect on January 1st, 2024. And it does so by going through each individual hit and offering a little bit of the author's insight into why that hit happened and what it means for the upcoming format. Except it's
Imagine
not
writing more than a
technical
sentence
text
about
explaining
Archie.
a ban list. It's written as like a giant bomb article.
And this kind of... Shit.
There's gamer adjacent.
My friend used to work for Giant Bomb, by the way.
AVGN style takedowns just sort of peppered in with actual insight, and as a result,
I don't know what MBT's talking about, by the way, because this might shock and surprise you. I don't read gaming articles. Because who the fuck reads gaming articles?
it occasionally ends up a little difficult to read. Now, Hex...
That's where you find, like, Silver Fang Raigeki combos, is on, like, article websites. I did when I was 8. Yeah, true. Actually, maybe back when, like, PlayStation 1 was the current meta, I think maybe that's when my last article I read was.
Lex condemns this just a little bit, but I want to get out in front of the hate. I think this article's fine. I think this article is very successful at what it sets out to be, which is one person's sarcastic takedown and opinion piece about the new list.
Is it that
in the
bad?
resultant discussion, however, I found that people not only thought the article was bad, but they didn't really have a good vocabulary for explaining why it was bad. That's because they couldn't separate the badness of this article from the badness of over a decade of Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. This article is...
That's not true. Yu-Gi-Oh! Content has been incredible since I started YouTubing. But anyway, this is the problem, right? It's a human problem. It isn't just a Yu-Gi-Oh! Thing. It's a human problem. People are unable to look at something objectively and judge whether or not it is a good objective piece. They always have to be influenced by their own personal opinion of it. If someone writes an article piece about the ban list, for example, and they give a lot of takes that I would disagree with, I should ideally be able to look at that and say, I disagree with this, but it's well structured. They've given good arguments, or, you know, they've given some good arguments, even though technically I wouldn't be able to agree with those arguments. There's a structure, there's a nuance, they've looked at the positives and the negatives, etc., etc. People can't do that, right? Because people look at a video, for example, even like a video like this, for example, people look at this video, and if they don't like it, it's a bad video. Right? But this is obviously a good video. Even if you disagree with this, it's like a good video because it's structured well, it highlights a point, there's an objective, etc., etc. So, especially ban list takes, right? Especially ban list pieces, because they're the most controversial pieces of content in YouTube, right? People don't understand that well-made and correct are different things, right? You can have a well-made video that isn't correct. You can have a correct video that's badly made. And people cannot separate from that. People refuse to. If they see a tier list, for example, and they think the tier list has one incorrect part of the tier list, bad take. This guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about. But the tier list might be actually overall quite well presented and quite well explained. But people aren't interested in that. People can't do that. People don't have people just have black and white understandings. They don't have nuance. They can't look at things objectively. That's like the biggest issue with probably something like that, right? It's like they saw this article by YGOrg, they read it, they didn't agree with some of the takes, therefore it's a shit article.
Is just one more in a pattern of years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting that has largely usurped informative articles with content creator-style sarcastic jabs at whatever they're talking about. This kind of begs the question, why are Yu-Gi-Oh! Players so bad at talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards? Articles like the one in the Hexlex tweet are so emblematic of just how weird Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting has gotten. Discussions of cards are so often framed in the language of, oh, thank God this card is gone, I hated playing against it, or this card made me feel like an asshole, and so infrequently in, like, terms of this card is good or bad for the upcoming format. So today,
I disagree that there's just been like an overall bad discourse around the game in general. There's plenty of content creators for years now who've, and not even content creators, just takes and posts on the internet, discussions that have been happening that people can give nuanced, good takes and opinion pieces and analysis of the ban list. Yeah, of course, there's plenty of people who just like chatting online, like Lamau bad ban list, etc. Right? Like that's gonna happen regardless, right? Of course. But I think there's been plenty of good discourse around stuff for years now.
I want to interrogate why Yu-Gi-Oh! Players suck at talking about the cards that we use to play the game that we all love. And thankfully, I think there's 3 reasons for this, which means we can sort them into categories that will be separated by a title card now. Okay, I hate to harp on this literally every time I talk about Yu-Gi-Oh!, but let's check out a parallel card game in Magic the Gathering. To my understanding, Magic largely doesn't have this problem. Yes, there are content creators that will make articles that sound
Shut up about
like
Magic!
what I'm complaining about, and certainly there's no short.
Every time he brings up Magic, just I don't care. I don't care. Oh, Joseph has this really bad habit of like referring to Magic whenever he like argues with things. That's fine. He's a Magic player. You know, that's obviously going to be like the only comparison that he knows, because it's the closest thing, right? Like, here's another card game. This is how they do it. But oh my god, 90% of the time, like when he talks about the other card game, he expects you to know what the fuck is going on in the other card game. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? Like, he'll bring up references and examples in other card game and name cards from other cards. I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about, Joseph. Like, can we stick to the subject that we do know? Anyway, let's see.
Shortage of individuals who will make reaction
Please don't just, please, I beg you, don't just talk about specific Magic examples.
style videos when Magic's ban list gets updated, but those are paired along.
What do they call it? Do they call it a ban list, or do they give it, like, some weird name? Because you know how, like, card game companies love to differentiate from each other, right? Like, Konami is, like, very, very strict on, like, it's not a board, it's a field, you know? It's not banish, it's remove from play, or I suppose technically banish is a real term now. Like, what do they call it in Magic? Like, what's the ban list? Do they call it, like, the Wizard Zone or something? Like, the Void Gate? Like, what is it called? They call it Brazil? Oh, shit.
Alongside a robust infrastructure of individuals talking about what the changes mean for the various impacted formats. In my opinion, the reason Magic the Gathering players are able to have that kind of intelligent discussion is twofold. Firstly, there is a reason to get to know every single card in the set. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are usually not particularly literate when it comes to what's legal. This isn't really their fault. There's one format and every card that's ever been printed is legal. You're not going to remember, like, Taylor of the Fickle exists, for instance, right?
I remember that because it swaps control of an equip card on the field that allows you to use it during an opponent's attack declaration when you're playing Progression Series with older DM-style formats. It's a good little battle trap trick that you can use. See, I know what that card is, Joseph. I know what that card is. So, boom. Boom. I know what that card is.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Players specialize early. Usually they go to a tier list video, pick a deck they think looks like something they'd enjoy, learn the ins and the outs of the strategy, and just sort of hope whatever your opponent's doing isn't going to interact with you in any sort of meaningful way. If you play a deck like Mathmech that occasionally gets new pieces of support but isn't itching for anything new, you could go like literal years without reading or learning any of the new cards. Inversely, if you want to play competitive Magic the Gathering, you are working with a much smaller card pool, and as a result you need to be much more familiar with what cards play what roles. If you want to play one of Magic's limited formats, you are going to need to know what cards are good in that format, why, and in what scenarios you will pick those cards for inclusion into your strategy, which dovetails nicely into the second reason that I think they're able to have this conversation more.
I don't know. I think that does the opposite, if anything. By the way, holy shit, Bathmech emote. I feel like that does the opposite. Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Only has one format, it actually becomes easier to learn what all of the cards are that are coming out in a new set, right? Because you only ever need to understand and look at those cards through one context, right? Whereas if there's a new set in Magic, a Magic player would read a new card and be like, okay, this is good in Modern, but it isn't good in Draft, but it isn't good in Commander, but it is good in Legacy, or, et cetera, right? Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh!, a new card comes out, you just read it, and you just know if it's going to be good or not, because there is only one format, right? Like, so I feel like, if anything, it's easier for Yu-Gi-Oh! Players.
Effectively, cards in Magic the Gathering are powerful based on what format they are being played in. Something that's strong in Standard might not be very strong in Modern, or something that's strong in Modern might not have legs in Standard. This means that every single card that is released is going to be scrutinized from a bunch of different angles. Is it playable within a draft format? Is it playable in one of several constructed formats with wildly varying power levels? And in doing so, Magic the Gathering players develop a skill for card evaluation that has to be practiced even by casuals. I can't make that clearer than the fact that there are entire formats dedicated to rewarding that expression of skill, evaluating cards and then deck building afterwards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players...
Well, I guess, like, in some ways that probably does help you understand cards from different angles, and then by learning cards in different angles, maybe you, like, click on to certain ideas that you wouldn't really notice, right? Because I think maybe in Yu-Gi-Oh! You read a card and be like, this isn't good in the Modern Advanced Constructed best deck of the format, Rescue Ace. This card is trash, I'm going to throw it away. It's like a random Water Sea Serpent, I'm never going to read that card or need it. But maybe potentially it could come up with some use if you think about it from the angle of a draft, and then that might spark like another idea, right? And then that idea gives you a eureka bulb moment for a different format. And then maybe it kind of circles back to the actual current format, and you can see the card in a different way than you did originally see it. That's why Notoria Landois is the best Adamantipator monster.
Don't actually ever have to exercise that part of their brain. It's really difficult for people to elucidate specifically why individual cards released in a new set are bad if they've never developed the underlying skills necessary to declare why any card is good or bad, or in what context it could be played. There's no limited...
Yu-Gi-Oh! Players only need to know only need one skill for evaluating cards, and that's it, right? Whereas a Magic player might want to look at it through 2 or 3 different formats, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player only needs to look at it through one format, which is going to just be easier, right? Because you only have to do it through one format compared to 2 or 3. So I feel like it's actually easier for us, because we only have one format, right?
Format, there's a culture of net decking in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which brings me to... You know, at some point I'm going to have to talk about how I'm part of the problem. But not today! So Yu-Gi-Oh! Content has just sort of shaken out in a very specific way over the last 5 years. Since COVID, and I'd argue maybe a couple of years before that, people have cared a lot more about content creators and their opinion than they've cared about the actual underlying card game. Now, I just want to get out ahead of admitting I'm part of the problem. I think that's fine. God knows caring about the Progression series in 2020 was a lot more fun than whatever Cecil format was, but it comes at the cost of consistent competitive content. I'd argue that a lot of the reason why people don't feel motivated to write something like an article series interrogating the underlying assumptions of the pendulum strategy, why every pendulum deck just loads up on extenders, why people are allergic to non-engine, why for some reason almost every pendulum strategy, regardless of how it's designed, feels like people are trying to force it into the mold of Build-A-Board, is because regardless of what you say in that article, the comment section is going to look the same. People are going to be typing penned best deck because they heard a YouTuber say it once. That's why a lot of these articles mirror the same type of...
I mean, sure, but like I feel like it's a niche thing for people to have actual real nuanced discussion about like specific interactions and the viability of cards and stuff like that publicly, right? Because I think like mostly, you know, people who read a new card or whatever, they probably just talk about it amongst their friends, right? There probably isn't like so many people like going out there talking about it in the public sphere about new cards and stuff. I don't really read the comment section generally of new card releases and stuff, except Master Duel Meta, which, you know, isn't going to be the highest quality. But I think like generally people probably just talk about it amongst themselves and with their friends in circle, right? Is usually where it comes from. I don't think there's like a booming, you know, crazy dedicated community for like you know, Pendulum, for example, right now, right? Like, it's probably just a niche little group who maybe have, like, a Discord server. Maybe there's, like, a couple of threads on, like, a random Reddit or something, right? And I think there's plenty of resources out there for people who care about those kind of things. I think, like, you know, there's plenty of, like, YouTube channels with, like, 200 subscribers that have, like, dedicated combo guides, deck profiles, different lines and stuff like that. for their respective decks, right? I always refer to the Infernity one, for example. Like it's crazy, right? Like I randomly took an interest in Infernity a few months ago. Found the archetype Discord. There's multiple like channels of like Macedo theory, TCG theory, deck lists, combo guides, example builds, etc., etc., right? And whenever a new card gets released, that's probably good for those decks. I think there's communities out there who probably do talk about and get that kind of content in the in-depth and analytical way that they want it to. I just think you kind of have to like look for it more so than usual. Archetype discords are usually shit. No, I disagree. I think people like very much underestimate the power of like archetype discords. Yes, it's usually just a circle jerk of people like complaining about everyone else not knowing how to play their pet deck, right? For sure. But if you are completely brand new to a deck, you have no idea how it works at all, you can absolutely find like an archetype Discord or some random like YouTube video probably, and it will give you like at least like a baseline for where to work from. And then there's probably people among that community. Don't get me wrong, every community has its like annoying like, you know, gatekeepers, etc., etc. There's probably people like within that community who are willing to help and talk about things and actually discuss like new cards and here's a new set that actually gives relevant support to this legacy deck, and people will talk about it. And it's just one of those things. I think you have to like look for it, right?
Language that you would see in a YouTuber-style breakdown. The people who are writing it are responding to the wants of a community that has largely displayed they want to see the Bussy Boy and Farfa argue for the 50th time more than they want to see a breakdown of what the Sun Avalon combo actually looks like.
The Bussy Boy and Farfa argue. Let's go.
Combination of individual personalities and the decks that they champion also dovetails nicely into the third problem.
The
So we talked about Magic in the first.
Oh, intellectual property. The IP?
Third, I'm now going to talk about Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of the same baggage as Pokemon. Competitive Pokemon is super interesting and engaging, but regardless of how interesting or creative the teams that people come up with are, the comment section of every Weedle Twineedle video is going to have a couple of references to a Pimp Night video that released in 2007 where a Magikarp swept a team of Ubers. There's this residual you have to...
Is that real? That sounds funny. Yo, can I watch that? That sounds great.
Win with your favorites attitude that's very pervasive among the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing casual fan base, but also kind of leaks into the competitive fan base as well. Sure, a significant amount of commenters are incapable of talking about a card like Mathmech Circular without mentioning that a well-timed Blue Eyes White Dragon can make quick work of any enemy, but a lot of really good...
Where's he going with this? Like, what's kind of the point of this part? I'm a little lost right now.
Players also internalized some lessons from the anime and learned that sticking by your chosen deck is a virtue. There's no way you can have that opinion regarding deck types
Just yapping.
Also amass the breadth of understanding necessary to speak from a position of authority about a whole bunch of other decks. All of this coalesces into a weird, frustrating mess. There's no articles about the fallout of the list, except for ones by people unfamiliar with what the decks impacted do, but those articles are published even though they don't contain anything particularly helpful, because you gotta publish something. That's how Yu-Gi-Oh! Content works. They gotta Guido. Remember that meme? But the end result is the same. A community of gamers that are really, really bad at talking about their game pieces. I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, Joseph, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can't...
I don't know. I feel like it's not completely true. I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are bad at talking about their game pieces. I think it's just a life thing, right? Like in any community, in every sphere of gaming or competitiveness, there's always like, you know, a bunch of people who are kind of adjacent to the game. They play kind of casually, and then they just kind of like give out like random takes and like, you know, say like rehashed, repurposed memes or opinions that are like a year old or something at that point, right? It's like, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are gonna do that. Right? But there's also going to be, like, really, you know, dedicated, smart people within that community that can give good takes and give good analysis and give good breakdowns. You know, there's plenty of, like, content creator. Like, Team Samurai, for example, posted a ban list, tier list thing, sitting down with a discussion with Nesh and Pac, you know, multiple YCS champion, plus Nesh, who is, you know, he's Nesh, he's Italian, he's smart. Right, like that's good content, right? 30-minute video discussion on the new ban list. Josh had his video uploaded. Jesse has discussions. It's out there. Like if you care, it's out there. Right? Like just because there's like a loud, annoying group of like just Redditors who like can't for the life of them elucidate in any sort of eloquent, meaningful way why Snatch Steal coming back is good or not good, right? Like, sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a nothing burger, right? I feel like we're kind of making mountains out of ant hills, or what's the saying called? Yeah.
Can't explain themselves in a way that's satisfactory to you. Why is that my problem? Well, I think there's consequences to this.
Moldy bread.
Yu-Gi-Oh players being bad at elucidating why cards are good and important for their decks betrays a
Borgor.
larger problem, where Yu-Gi-Oh players straight up do not know why they are playing the cards they're
Borgor.
playing. They know what a completed deck looks like, and they can get good at wielding the tools that are available in their arsenal, but they lack the neural pathways necessary to explain why each card is in each slot and why other cards shouldn't be there. And the few people in
Is that a bad thing, though? Like, really ask yourself, is this a bad thing? If someone just, like, picks up a deck for fun that they net deck out of a tier list and they play it just because they, like, kind of enjoy it, is that really that bad? Like, some people don't want to or care enough to put in the time, effort to really understand and figure out and really absorb all of the information as to that deck list, right? Like, because sometimes I'll, like, just pick up, like, a random archetype or deck, and you know, I don't care to, like, know all of the nuances and stuff like that. It's just something to, like, kind of play around and have fun with, right? I don't, like, think it's, like, necessary for every single person to ever pick up a Yu-Gi-Oh card to have, like, this, you know, excess info dump load of information on the importance of every single piece together, right? I think, like, it's fine if people just people don't have the tools to, like, really understand the totality of the deck itself, right? One perfect example is, like, some decks I like playing, like, just for fun, right? And I don't really need to know, like, the in-depth pathways of every single, you know, position of each card in the deck, right? Because I'm one of those people, for example, I enjoy playing the game more than I enjoy, like, deck building usually. So for me, I love just being able to pick up like a, you know, a fleshed out, completed deck list perfected by someone who cares a lot about that deck. Pick it up and just play it and just have fun with it, right? Like, I enjoy that. You know, if it was like, it's sort of like a chess thing, right? Where you, like, you would rather spend the time, like, well, no, that's maybe not a good way to word it. Just as a general thing, right? Like, so for a lot of people, and, like, for me specifically in this scenario, there are some decks where, like, I don't really need to know, like, the depth of, like, all of the interactions and points of a deck, right? Like, I think it's kind of cool. It looks good. Someone's figured it out. Someone knows this deck quite well. Let me just pick it up and have fun with it, right? Like, for example, I won my local thing with Tearlament. I didn't build it myself. I had no idea what was going on with it. I just let my friend build it for me, give me the deck. I didn't really know all of the interactions and combos within it because there isn't really with Tearlament. It's very freestyle. So to be able to just pick up a deck that works, that I trust has been built well by my friend, and just play it and enjoy it and have fun with it, I think it was a good experience. You know, I don't think you need to put in all, like, a huge time dump into learning and understanding a deck before you can just enjoy it, right, at a very basic level. Farfa's friend is the greatest if you built something for Farfa to win.
in the community that do have that ability.
In other card games, it's more incentivized for you to come up with your own deck because Yu-Gi-Oh is so complex and casual mid-tier players usually will build something completely unplayable. Sure. It's important that when you need to explain something to understand the something. If I ask someone who played Fire King why it works and why these ratios, the answer is, I don't know, watch a video, then it won't be helpful. By player not having the knowledge, it will block people wanting to actually get better. Well, yeah, but there's two ways to it, right? There's, like, people like me who want to pick up a deck just for the sake of having fun with it, especially with the ban list coming soon. And guess what? All of that tier theory I would have learned about my tierment deck is just out the window now because the deck needs to be, like, redesigned with the ban list, right? For example. So it's like I basically would have just wasted my time learning all of that. Now there's a new ban list. Maybe now I can do all of that stuff, right? But I don't think it's, like, I don't think it's as important. Like, if people want to just pick up a fully fleshed out deck designed by a content creator or a pro player on YouTube, that's fine. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I guess it's probably only problematic when they get very cocky and loud with it, right? Like, probably people who just kind of net deck and then they start, like, acting like an authority on it because they've done well with it at one locals, for example. That's probably when it becomes kind of problematic, and probably what he's referring to mostly is the loudmouths who don't really understand their deck. They just kind of picked it up, played it, had a little bit of success with it, and now they're just chatting, right? Like, that's obviously a huge problem. But is that, like, a Yu-Gi-Oh unique problem? I don't know.
Ability aren't writing articles. They're racking up YCS wins. There's a lot that Yu-Gi-Oh has to do if we want to be taken as seriously as a game like Magic the Gathering when it comes to competitive
Okay, no one is going to take Yu-Gi-Oh seriously like they do Magic, because that's just a different audience, right? Like, that's just never gonna happen.
play. Certainly as players, a lot of that is out of our hands. Giving the platform
Magic
necessary
is taken
to individuals
seriously?
who know what they're talking about and are able to describe it is something that we're not going to be able to do at a local level. But one thing we absolutely can change from the perspective of an individual duelist is our mindset. It is good to practice skills like card evaluation that usually don't get tested. It's a strength to be able to elucidate why every single card in your deck is important without pointing whoever's asking to a Jesse Cotton video. And only when that understanding is commonplace will we finally receive Yu-Gi-Oh reporting that doesn't read like a Maddox article from 2009. That's it.
Jesus Christ, Maddox reference. Oh my god. I haven't heard that name in years.
See ya.
To be fair, his, like, I'm just saying, if any, like, this is definitely absolute B-boomer moment right now. But if anyone has read Maddox's article on Idaho, it's one of the funniest things ever. I love that article. Well, I don't know. To be fair, I'm saying that now. Maybe I could be wrong, because it's been like 15 years or something since I read that. But it's very funny. I have a question. Why would I point someone to Jesse when he's better than me? That's a valid point as well. It's like, actually, if you think about it, is it actually bad to just point it to a Jesse video? I don't know. Anyway. I don't know. I feel like this video is like an interesting discussion, but I just don't think it's that big of a problem, right? Like, I don't know. Card evaluation is such a subjective thing to some people, right? And the problem is really just inherently with the game itself, right? Yu-Gi-Oh has one format, one current way to play the game. If you look at a card, you only have one lens to analyze it through, and that's all you're really getting. So I guess, like, getting good at that is really all that matters, right? Is like, does my new support card loop my opponent's hand for 2, pay my student loans, omni negate, special summon itself for free, etc., etc. That's usually how most Yu-Gi-Oh players look at new cards and stuff like that. Is that a problem? Probably. Is it the biggest deal ever? No, not necessarily, because I think, like, the people who actually care about the highest levels of Yu-Gi-Oh are the ones who are putting in the work and putting in the graft and actually being able to give those details and give that analysis to the downward trend of people in the world that are looking for it, right? Anyway, yep, this was an interesting discussion. All right, peace.